What's going on YouTube? It's Deej, back again with another video, and today we're going to break down my Week 3 NFL Power Rankings, who's going up, who's going down, and what all is the biggest change from my Week 2 Power Rankings. Excited to bring this your way. We had a great weekend of football, and hey, this premise is pretty simple. Let's jump right into it. And we got not a lot of movement there at the bottom. Cardinals, Texans, Panthers all coming up with the loss this week. Cardinals, heartbreaker there. Dobbs didn't play terribly bad. Still got a little bit of pass rush there, which is actually a little bit more than I thought they would have. My man, the Barbarian, Dennis Gardeck, up to 3 sacks this year. So I think we're starting to see some positive signs, some signs of life, so to speak, for the Cardinals. Hollywood Brown gets in the end zone. Michael Wilson with a nice catch early on. But it's going to be a bad year for Arizona. And then for the Texans, tough one. Got a lot of garbage time. And if you're a Texans fan, be excited about seeing C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell connect on some big plays. And also Nico Collins with a career game. So hopefully Collins gets to see more of it, get to see the first career catch for John Mechie III. And then, of course, the Tank Dell, Tud, and then C.J. Stroud putting up a ton of yards in garbage time. Hopefully this is where we start to see the Texans really get the ball rolling offensively. And the Panthers coming at 30. I know Bryce Young didn't look great on Monday night, but he looks like a guy without a number one wide receiver right now, which is a little problematic for Jonathan Mingo. Not too surprising for me, considering what I've been saying all offseason about Adam Thielen. And Laviska Shenault's a nice little gadget player, but unfortunately, despite how high I was on him coming out of Colorado, he has not been able to do anything more than just be a nice third, fourth role wide receiver, essentially. So, yeah, I think it's going to continue to be tough for Bryce Young without a clear-cut alpha number one. Maybe Jonathan Mingo figures it out eventually. I think the defense is still relatively solid. No J.C. Horn, because he's on IR for the first 4 weeks at least. That definitely hurts, but I think there are pieces to be excited about for Carolina right now. Wide receiver is a huge question mark that needs an answer sooner rather than later. Broncos down 2 spots. I kind of hit on this last week. I don't think Denver is going to be very good. And a lot of it is I just don't think Russell Wilson is who he was 3 years ago. So everyone who thought Sean Payton was going to be able to turn back the clock, I think that was a little foolish. So I think we kind of saw more of that. Not that Russell Wilson looked terrible. I mean, the first half box score looked crazy, but I think that was more so a lot of busted coverages and big plays given up by that Washington secondary. They tightened some stuff up at halftime, and it plays as a completely different game. And we even saw Sam Howell look pretty sharp against that Denver defense. So I'm actually feeling a little less solid or confident in that side of the ball than I was last week. So obviously a little problematic. Broncos down 2 spots. Rams are going to hold tight at 28. They battled pretty tough there with San Francisco. And Puka Nacua is one of the major stories in the NFL right now. So I'm going to keep them where they are despite the loss. And now my biggest question is going to be post week 4. If Cooper Kupp comes off IR, then can him and Nacua coexist in this offense? They play that same role. Can one of them move outside and still be productive? Because if so, then I think LA is going to be a team that shoots up these rankings. I was a little skeptical about what we saw week 1, but week 2 kind of proved to me that this team can legitimately compete. Sean McVay, that offense is still sharp. Matt Stafford, hey, the first 6 quarters of this year are as good as just about any quarterback in the league. Last 2 quarters of Sunday was a little tougher. That's give and take with the gunslinger. But yeah, if they can legitimately get Cooper Kupp back and then have 2 wide receivers plus a Van Jefferson plus a Tyler Higbee, okay, I think there's enough there on that offense to keep them pretty competitive. Colts up 2 spots. Anthony Richardson goes down pretty early on, which sucks. That definitely is a bummer there for sure, because he's been playing well and he got the 2 rushing tuds early. I was excited to see what else he could do in that game. But the good news is Gardner Minshew is a top 40 quarterback in the league. Therefore, he's a pretty good backup, and he showed that this past week. Houston's not the toughest opponent, so I can't say the Colts are like a Super Bowl contender, but it's a nice win. Good team effort. They controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Gardner was a really solid backup, to have step into the game for Anthony Richardson. Still seeing those wide receivers make some good plays. Zach Moss, a nice story as well. Colts up 2 spots. Raiders down 4, and this is really not me saying the Raiders are garbage. I think it's just going to be kind of a rotating, carousel. It's going to be kind of musical chairs really for teams like 23 to 26. I feel like these same 4 teams are pretty much going to share these numbers and just kind of rotate around. The Raiders defense, like I predicted last week, not only in these power rankings, but also in the betting preview show that we do, the Hurry Up Offense, I said they were going to get torched by Buffalo. Buffalo was going to have a bounce back game, and luckily enough, I was correct. That Raiders defense is an absolute issue. They're down 4 spots. Then the Falcons are up 1. And look, it was a solid win. I took the Packers, so I'm not saying that Atlanta's garbage and I'm slow. I'm hating on them or anything like that. Don't take this as me saying the Falcons are just trash because I hate them. Desmond Ridder still looks bad. And that's the simple matter of it. And Jordan Love, yes, he had the 3 touchdowns, but I really don't think it was that great of a game for him. Honestly, Matt LaFleur, again, probably deserves more of the credit than Jordan Love does. And that's also an offense really missing Christian Watson, also no Aaron Jones. So not to kind of like take points away from the Atlanta Falcons, but I think they got a suboptimal Packers, team. Even based off of what we already know they are coming into this season versus where they were last year. They were without 2 of their best offensive players, and then the Falcons. Bijan's great. Tyler Oju is a really nice number 2 running back, but not getting anything out of the playmakers outside. Desmond Ridder still looks like a major work in progress. The defense is better though. There's also a ton of parity in the league right now. Like Team 25 in the NFL now would be so much higher on these power rankings if it was 20 years ago. There's just a lot of depth in the NFL right now. So sorry, Falcons fans, which could move you up more, but it's a dense league right now. On to the next set of teams, we got the Buccaneers, also up a spot. One of the bigger surprises for me, Baker didn't look too bad, especially early on. So excited to see what more this offense can be, right? Like if Baker is really fitting into that system, he's got a couple of nice wide receivers. The offensive line hasn't been great, but it's not also looked as rough maybe as it did last year. So I'm optimistic about where this could go. And the defense has been playing pretty solid. Joe Tryon-Shank is a guy pegged as a breakout candidate. Devin White's played a couple of good games. The corners are still really nice with Davis and Jamel Dean there. So this team might continue to move up these rankings. It's also a wide open division, so that definitely helps a ton. They're going to have a lot of easy matchups considering 6 of their games this year are against the Panthers, the Saints, and the Atlanta Falcons. All right, then we get to the Commanders, also up a spot. What a game that was against Denver. The 4 o'clock slate surprisingly was way better than the 1 o'clock slate, which I didn't anticipate saying. Part of that was, kind of a dud performance from one team that we'll talk about later on in this video, but 4 o'clock games, a lot of comebacks, and it was pretty lit to watch. And included in that was Washington. I actually had a buddy who bet them, bet $50, won like $750. So you do the odds. Man came up big, believing that they were going to make that comeback. And Sam Howell's throwing some nice darts, man. It's not always perfect. He's still holding the ball a lot. The offensive line's not great, so there's a lot of sacks in there, but he's given chances for his playmakers, Jahan Dotson, the Terry McLaurins of the world, and Logan Thomas with a big touchdown catch when he takes a huge hit to the head. The defense is nice. Montez Sweat, Chase Young, top 2 registered pressures in the PFF database right now. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about. Penalty against Jamin Davis still feels like he's a work in progress. A linebacker might be an issue. Forbes gives it the big play to Marvin Mims in the first half, comes back with a pick in the second, so we're still kind of going through some learning curves there for Forbes. But all in all, man, Washington's continuing to prove that they're a pretty solid team. And again, teams 23 through 26, I feel like these guys are just going to all rotate around that area. Bears are down 3 spots, and they may also join that 23 to 26 group. Every week I watch Justin Fields, I get a little bit more concerned. There's not much more meat on the bone. I am really getting to the point now where I don't want to call it panicked, but I am heavily concerned that he just might not figure it out as a passer, at least in Chicago. Good to see Chase Claypool get into the end zone. But yeah, it's a bad defensive line. They got a couple nice plays in there, but the defense, that is. But they're also down a couple safeties. Now there's question marks about Matt Eberflus. Kind of feels like a lot of the stuff that people were excited about with Chicago through 2 weeks is kind of falling on its face, which is sad. I'm going to have New England stay put at 21. Really competitive loss. And a couple plays late away from being able to potentially tie it up against Miami, who, spoiler alert, going to be in the top 5. So that's not a bad loss. And a lot of the things that we kind of thought about New England, hey, they're going to battle, non-division non-division teams pretty well, and they'll probably fare okay there. And we kind of saw that last week against the Eagles, one of the best teams in the NFL. They battled them down to the wire. And then even in division, they play on maybe the hardest division in football. They battled down to the wire. So defense looking solid. Mac Jones still has some nice plays. They just don't have anybody special there on the outside. So when push comes to shove, they're just praying that Devontae Parker turns into someone he's not, or Kendrick Bourne for that matter, or Mike Gesicki. And I will say, Bill Belichick, I respect him. Greatest football coach of all time. He's got to get Mario Douglas out there. I know he fumbled, but you can't let your most explosive playmaker with the ball in his hands sit on the bench when you have no one else who can play that type of role. So hopefully we can see more of Mario Douglas next week, and hopefully we don't see any more fumbles from him. Then we get the Titans up 3 spots. Night and day with Ryan Tannehill between week 1 and week 2, so it's great to see him have that bounce back performance, and I'm sure the wide receivers are really appreciating, especially Nick Westbrook-Akina. He finds the end zone, and so does Treylon Burks on a big play. That's nice to see. So does Derrick Henry. He finds the end zone, and think about how simple and intuitive this is. When you pass the ball well, it makes it that much easier for your running back. So good to see that offense really step up. Now, I'll be honest, I think a lot of that is the Chargers defense is probably a little overrated. And I mean, I'm saying that based off of preseason expectations. I think we're all kind of in the same boat now looking at that Chargers defense. It's not good, which is a huge problem for Brandon Staley, considering former defensive coordinator. That's part of why he got the job. But because of that, made Tennessee's offense look really, really good. And that's a great run defense. And therefore, they kind of forced Justin Herbert to win the game. And Keenan Allen went bananas against Tennessee. So that secondary still got some issues, but push came to shove, Mike Vrabel, these are the type of games that he just finds a way to muster a win out of with that roster. So, yeah, nice showing there from Tennessee and looked a whole lot better than they did week 1. Packers down 3 spots. Like I said, I don't think yes, it's 3 touchdowns, but I don't think Jordan Love played great. They definitely missed Christian Watson and Aaron Jones in this one. The defense is still really solid. Ultimately, just a few balls didn't break their way. We already kind of talked about this Atlanta-Green Bay game. I still like Green Bay, but hopefully once they get a little healthier on offense, we'll really see this team take a step forward. The Giants up a spot. What an awesome comeback. And I'd love to move them up more, but, I still think the Steelers, head to probably take Pittsburgh. I don't know. That's tough to say considering, Matt Canada still exists, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the Giants, man, great adversity, and we really get to see, hopefully, Saquon Barkley on the field pretty soon, but he had a huge role to play there in that second half. Rushing score, then also catching one from Daniel Jones, who was awesome in the second half. Got a couple big plays from Jalen Hyatt as well. Defense stepped up in a big way in the second half as well. So it felt like the first 6 quarters of the year are a New York Giants team that we won't see, hopefully, moving forward. Hopefully that was just kind of the fluke and, 6 bad quarters, and now we really can see what the Giants are. Because, man, it was night and day between the first and second half. Steelers, I'll have them stay put here at 17. It was a nice win, trust me. I'm not going to tell you I wasn't pumped up to see Pittsburgh win at home Monday Night Football. But I just don't know how many games you can say in a 17-game schedule that a defense can just will itself to a win. Pick 6 on the opening play. You get the forced fumble from Highsmith, scoop and score from Watt. That's just not going to happen every week, no matter, how tenacious and how bad they want it. That's just not always going to happen. And man, oh man, I can appreciate how calm and steady Mike Tomlin is, but for him to hear the chatter, and not only just fans bitching about Matt Canada, but Troy Aikman's writing his obituary on the broadcast, and everywhere you go, people are criticizing, Matt Canada, the job he's doing. Dan Orlovsky the next day on ESPN. People are talking about it on the NFL Network. It's just kind of public fact almost at this point, and they just will not make a change. So I think Pittsburgh's offense is going to continue to be limited because of it, and I think it's going to continue to be kind of a tough go for Kenny Pickett. It was great to see him and Pickens create some big plays, but even then, there was a point in the game where it was 13 targets to 4 completions. Now, one of those completions was a 71-yard tud, so you can kind of live with that, but in a different game, that won't fly. All right, then we're on to the top half of this list. Vikings down a spot. They're 0-2. I still think in a head-to-head, I'd probably have them favored over the Steelers if it was a neutral site. So that's why I got them ahead. It's just clean up the fumbles. They got 7 turnovers and 5 of them were fumbles, or 6 of them were fumbles. It's crazy. This is the type of year where if you're a Kirk Cousins stan, you're looking at the box score numbers and you're like, he's a god. And if you're a Kirk Cousins hater, this is the type of year where you're look, he can put up those numbers and he's still not elite. He's just not good enough. So no matter what, no matter how you feel about Kirk Cousins, this is the year for you to prove your point. It's just confirmation bias. Look, his numbers are crazy, but he's also been playing from behind for basically all 8 quarters of the season. So that definitely inflates it. And he has 2 good wide receivers. And, I never said Kirk was bad, but it's going to be interesting to see if he can overcome this 0-2 hole in a division that right now is still relatively open, but I don't know. We'll see what the lines look like in 8 weeks. So, I don't know. The defense is still a little rough there in Minnesota. And against the Eagles, there is no bigger glaring mismatch than the Eagles' interior defensive line versus Minnesota's interior offensive line. And it showed. But it's still not a bad team. I still got them in the top half of the league, even though I know, yes, they are 0-2, but there's a lot of offensive firepower. They get rid of those fumbles. This team is winning some games. Saints are up 3 spots. Derek Carr is going to be good enough to keep them in games. The wide receiver room's as good as he's had in a while, and this is easily the best defense that Derek Carr has played with during his career, at least the one that comes top of mind. So that's a huge benefit. Yes, it wasn't super pretty, but it's a road game, a division win on Monday Night Football. You cannot take this for granted. I think it's a really well-rounded roster. If this team stays healthy and doesn't have its depth tested, it's going to continue to come up this board. Browns 2 spots, and it feels like they're going to continue to fall down, man. I don't know how they lost to Pittsburgh. Also, prayers up for Nick Chubb. I mean, what an absolute brutal break for his season. And, I mean, he was looking awesome last night, and then just kind of foot planted wrong, hit comes the wrong way, and he kind of pays the price for it. That really sucks for a guy that I actually really, really like watching, even though I'm not a Browns fan, I'm a Steelers fan. But that point aside, Deshaun Watson still wasn't pretty, man. And I will say there was a lot of like speed option calls there from Kevin Stefanski. He typically is an OC or he's a head coach, but offensive mind that I like, and he is their play caller, and I typically like what he brings to the table. It was kind of a weird game that he was calling up against Pittsburgh. I think he kind of outthought himself, maybe trying to slow down that Pittsburgh pass rush. I don't know. I'd love to get it in his head and figure out what he was trying to think and what was he working through, but Watson still didn't look great, and that's an issue. And if that continues to be the trend, man, if we don't get back to 2019 Deshaun Watson, man, the Browns are going to continue to trickle down this board. Look at the Lions. I want to stay put at 13. I vote that there's a petition that we get the Seahawks and Lions playing every year until they stop making awesome offensive shootouts. Like until it stops, I want to see these teams play every year. And again, the offense looks good. Defense, I don't think it was bad. I just think the Seahawks were cooking. And you're potentially a holding call away, against Aiden Hutchinson from, getting that stop and then coming away with a win here. So, I didn't move the Lions up after they beat the Chiefs. I'm not going to move them down after they lose to the Seahawks. To me, 13 is, again, about where they should be. Then we get to the Chargers. They're down a spot, and I'm concerned that they might be falling even more. Justin Herbert, not the problem. Keenan Allen, huge game. Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston. The offense is good, and they're going to get Austin Eckler back at some point, and they're going to get even better. It's Brandon Staley in this defense, and if you told me I'd be saying that the day that the Chargers hired Brandon Staley, I would call you a liar. But ultimately, the whole calling card for Brandon Staley's hire has let him down. That defense is abysmal. It's brutal to watch, and it makes you just think, man, the Chargers. They interviewed Brian Daboll. They interviewed Eric Bieniemy. Man, like, what could have been in a different world, especially the Brian Daboll option, because like, holy cow, what the work he's done for the Giants. Like, I'd love to see that with the Chargers, but I digress. Staley's definitely on a hot seat. The Chargers have never fired a coach in season, so I'm not like rushing out to bet Staley first head coach fired or anything like that. But, Kellen Moore also did get some head coaching interviews. I do wonder if there's a world where we get to the offseason, they elevate Kellen Moore, they fire Brandon Staley, and then he gets the choice of any defensive coordinator he wants. Or, shoot, I don't know what his and Dan Quinn's relationship was like in Dallas, but could you bring Dan Quinn in to be the head coach and Kellen Moore is fine staying on as the OC? I don't know what their working relationship was like, but if they can, that might be the move, because ultimately Brandon Staley has been a huge disappointment. And that sucks considering how much I was excited about that hire. Seahawks are up 3 spots. We got to see this team bounce back. Week 1 was a weird showing. It made no sense for Seattle, but we got to see that offense fully wake up, and they did it down 2 tackles. That's impressive. So a lot of big-time plays. The defense still has some work to be done, but that's also a really good Detroit offense. We've already talked about this game a little bit. And again, I stand by it. Seahawks, Lions, I need to see this game played every single year until they stop having shootout contests. Jets down 3 more spots. They may continue to fall even further. And they will continue to fall even further. Zach Wilson just does not look good. I just don't make, I don't make over 1 week massive changes and drastic moves down the board, but trust me, by week 4, the Jets are probably out of this column at this rate. The defense is great, and honestly, until like the mid-third, fourth quarter, the defense was doing its part to keep itself in the game, but time of possession, I mean, there's only so much you can ask a defense to do when they're on the field for 2/3 of the game or thereabout. Eventually you get tired, and against a good Dallas offense, getting tired is costly. So, love that defense. Unfortunately, Zach Wilson he may look a little better, but it's just not enough. And the Jags are up a spot. They lost, yes, but they battled tough with Kansas City, who got back 2 of their 3 best players. And we're talking about, a toe tap with Calvin Ridley in the back of the end zone, a potential Zay Jones touchdown away from a tie ball game in overtime. Like, there were a few plays, which I know you can say this about any football team in any football game, but there's a few plays where, like, if a foot gets down, if a catch is made, this game plays out differently, and the Jags are right there with it, if not in overtime, and potentially could even win. So, ultimately, yes, it's a bummer to lose that game if you're Jacksonville, but they looked competitive. And they're showcasing between the wild card last year, this game at home, they're capable of being able to battle the Kansas City Chiefs. And if they get a few breaks their way, if these 2 teams see themselves to the playoffs, Trevor Lawrence is getting to a point where he's able to be seen in the QB tiers like a Burrow and like an Allen, where he can go toe-to-toe with Mahomes. I'm not saying he's better, but but he can go toe-to-toe with them, and that's a huge win there if you're a Jacksonville fan. On to the top 8. Bengals are down 4 spots, another team that may continue to fall. And I'm going to be doing a video later this week on, buy, sell, or rent, teams with a 2-0 or 0-2 record. Basically saying if I think that team's legit at 2-0, or if that team's actually bad enough, they're going to be 0-2 and struggle this year, things like that. So if the Bengals, they're going to be one of the teams to talk about at 0-2. And ultimately it comes down to how bad this re-aggravated calf is for Joe Burrow. I was a little surprised to hear him say he felt it in the last couple of minutes of the fourth quarter, because I felt like I saw it all game. Watching him throw, especially deep down the field, it's Scotty from Star Trek. It's Scotty on the Enterprise. He's giving it all he's got, but because he can't push off that back leg, that right leg, that's brittle, so he doesn't have any extra oomph to put behind it. So he is just putting his shoulder and basically his entire upper body into every throw, and he's not getting the same distance. You throw with your lower half. Baseball, football, you name it, you throw with your lower half. So until he's comfortable planting on that right foot, I am concerned, and I wonder if he ends up missing time, because his team's not going to be as good without a top 3 quarterback in the league when he's healthy. But yeah, that passing attack just doesn't look great. They've been hesitant to go to the run game, which I don't normally mind, but with a banged up Joe Burrow, it might be worth considering. And the defense also been a little disappointed too. And I thought Lou Anarumo was going to get himself into head coaching interviews and probably land a job next coaching carousel. Now I'm a little skeptical, because that defense has been a little disappointing, and specifically as the pass rush unit and that rotation has been a little underwhelming. So we'll see where it goes this year. A lot of question marks right now for Cincinnati. Buffalo's up a spot. This is the bounce back game we all kind of thought we would see. The offense looked awesome. A bunch of big plays against a very bad Raiders defense. This matchup played true to what it is on paper, so good for the Bills. Cowboys up a spot. They beat up on the Jets. I mean, Dak Prescott to Zach Wilson. I know I'm higher on Dak, it feels like, than most people, but that's a huge advantage in the QB column. And as good as the Jets defense is, Dallas is not far behind. And honestly, when it comes to flying the ball, Dallas probably has the most athletic, fastest defense in the NFL right now. It is ridiculous. That secondary is all over the field. And then also Micah Parsons, him and Myles Garrett, these two guys are going to go toe-to-toe, it feels like, all year long for Defensive Player of the Year. Not to discredit Nick Bosa and TJ Watt, but it feels like Garrett and Parsons right now got the head start on those other two guys. And ton of credit to Dan Quinn. Taking advantage of the athlete that Micah Parsons is on stunts and twists should be against the... If we're going to make a rule not allowing the push-tush, or the tush-push, then we might need to outlaw Micah Parsons being used on stunts, because no offensive lineman is athletic enough to keep up with the man, and he's just screaming the quarterback. So, I don't know. The league will pass it off as a safety measure. But anyways, jokes aside, Parsons is great. The defense as a whole is awesome. The offense eventually wore down the Jets. They're up a spot. Ravens also up a spot. What a gutsy win that was against Cleveland. Even with Cleveland not playing great, it was still close down to the wire. Lamar Jackson played really well. The defense outperformed my expectations, because I was on the side of the Bengals. I bet Joe Burrow props. I bet Jamar Chase. Thought they were going to bounce back. But really, ultimately, I look back at when the Ravens made the switch from Wink Martindale to Mike McDonald's the DC. I think this is literally the matchup that they were like, we struggle too much against Kansas City because we play too much man coverage, and we struggle against the Bengals because we play too much man coverage. Mike McDonald, we need you to come in. We need to revamp what we're doing here. And these are the types of games why, yes, you can be comfortable with good. And Wink Martindale had that defense at a very good level. They were a good unit. But you got to chase great. And Mike McDonald, ultimately, because of the matchup and how he plays things different, put that team in a better spot. And what's better than good? That would be great. So, ultimately, I still think there's some holes on that side of the ball, but Mike McDonald came together with a great game plan. The offense executed at a high level, and John Harbaugh works his magic, and this team comes up with a gutsy AFC North win. That makes Cleveland 0-2, or Cincinnati, 0-2 in the division. That's big. So huge win there for the Ravens, and that's massive. One win away from taking a sweep against Cincy, which would be massive, and probably give them a pretty clear front-running position to take the AFC North. Long tangent aside, Miami Dolphins up a spot. They looked pretty good against New England, and really what I want to talk about here is Tyreek Hill. I mean, I know we all think about him as the over-the-top burner. He gets the big plays, but he can also be a high-volume guy. There's a world out there where, an alternate universe where Tyreek Hill's hauling in 110, 120 catches a year. He just doesn't have the average depth of target. He doesn't have the 80-yard bombs on his highlight reel that he does with the Chiefs and how they used him, and Miami, how largely they've used him. But because New England's playing so far back, I love that Mike McDaniel was awesome, bring it. We'll throw it to Tyreek Hill 8 yards underneath and tackle this Jackrabbit. Like, you get a couple big plays then too from Jalen Waddle, and the defense still, I think, for the most part, looked pretty sharp. Xavier Howard basically runs the route on that last, attempt to get to the interception. And they also did this without Jalen Phillips. That's huge. So I feel like the defense got a little bit better despite missing some key pieces. And the offense had to change and adapt to combat Bill Belichick. And, I mean, Tua Tagovailoa was 5-0 against Bill Belichick. There are a lot of quarterbacks who would die to be able to say that. So, very, very impressed with the Dolphins still. Chiefs, Eagles, 49ers. I'm going to keep my top three the same. Chiefs, not the prettiest of wins, but I think it's a good opponent. And on the road, can't take that for granted. And it was good to see Kelsey get back in the end zone. He's still not quite 100%. But you know who is? Chris Jones. Off the street, essentially. This man, still one of the best interior defensive linemen in football. And while Donald kind of, I think, week one showcased, hey, don't forget about me, I'm the best IDL in football. Chris Jones kind of showed in week two, hey, don't forget about me, I'm basically on his heels. So it was good to see him back on the field, and big time road win there for the Chiefs. Then the Eagles, good Thursday night win against the Minnesota Vikings, and now they get the extra days of rest. This is when this team gets really, really scary. And again, that interior defensive line was a huge mismatch on paper against Minnesota, and boy, did Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, they made some nice plays in that game. And you also get some big plays from Devonta Smith. A.J. Brown wants the ball, but ultimately I think you just got to play the matchups there. So hopefully they've kind of figured that out. I'm sure week 3, A.J. Brown probably leads his team in targets to keep him happy. But ultimately, Devonta Smith was the open guy, getting behind that Minnesota defense. Jalen Hurts didn't miss the throw. So, just another good week of play there from the Philadelphia Eagles, living up to the expectations we've set for them. And I got the 49ers at 1. I kind of thought about flipping these two, but ultimately, it's the week 3 power rankings. This is not the end-all, be-all. And Brock Purdy, shades of 2020 Jimmy Garoppolo, overthrowing people left and right. It was like he heard that he was Mr. Relevant and didn't have arm talent and said, well, watch this. Overthrow to Brandon Ayuk, overthrow Juwan Jennings. I think there was one more in there somewhere. And it's like, dude, I need you to hit some throws. But he has been very solid up to this point. This is the one game where he has been a little spotty pushing the ball deep down the field. So we will let it pass if it is just this one-time occurrence. If it continues to be a trend for the next 2-3 weeks, this team will float down these power rankings. But if it gets back on track, it's hard to imagine them not at 1 because CMC, Debo is the hero this week. And that's the one weird thing about this offense is they have so many different playmakers, but it feels like only one can go off in a given week. CMC and Brandon Ayuk, I guess, week 1, but run game, pass game. It feels like only one of them can be an insane game-changing pass catcher. And then it's Debo doing a little bit of both. But nevertheless, there's just so much firepower there on the offensive side that it's just so hard to match up with Shanahan and what he's trying to do. And that defense continues to be awesome. And ultimately, Sean McVay kind of pushed them in the first half, but they kind of hunkered down and eventually just trusted what they were doing. And then Matt Stafford, he can get on a heater and he can be dangerous, but also he plays a dangerous game and eventually he'll make some interceptions, he'll make some costly plays, some poor decisions, and it'll turn into an interception that the 49ers capitalized on that. So they stay at number 1, but let me hear your power rankings down below in the comment section. Who you got at 1, and then all the way down through the rest of the top 10. And where's your favorite team? Where would you put them in their power rankings? Do I have them too high? Do I have them too low? Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Appreciate everybody checking out this video. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and want to see more football content like this. But until next time, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.